Most people think policy changes when laws change, when a bill passes, when a vote is held, when a leader announces something new. That's how governance is supposed to work. Still, many of the rules shaping daily life now didn't arrive that way. They weren't debated, they weren't campaigned on, they weren't voted in. They simply appeared quietly inside systems that already existed. A form changes, a threshold updates, a process tightens. You notice it when an application you qualified for last year now auto-rejects you. No explanation, no person to ask, no speech, no announcement, no moment where anyone says, "This is now policy." This is usually the moment people feel something shift without being able to point to a decision that caused it. Because governance didn't disappear, it changed form. Traditionally, policy had friction. It moved slowly, it required justification. It created visible disagreement. Proposals were argued over, consequences were contested, trade-offs were exposed. Even unpopular policies passed through recognizable steps: debate, compromise, accountability. You could trace who decided, why they decided, and how that decision could be challenged or reversed. That visibility mattered, not because it produced perfect outcomes, but because it made power legible. People accepted rules they disliked because they recognized the process that produced them. Policy felt human, messy, political, arguable. This is usually where people forget something important. Policy wasn't just about outcomes, it was about consent. You might not agree with the rule, but you could see how it came into being. You could argue against it. You could organize. You could vote differently next time. That friction created legitimacy, even when the results were imperfect. That legitimacy mattered because it anchored disagreement. Even when people lost arguments, they understood why they lost them. They could see the process. They could name the decision. They could point to the moment power was exercised. When policy is visible, resistance feels possible. When it isn't, frustration has nowhere to land. That absence changes how people relate to power. When you can't point to a decision, anger loses its target. Disagreement turns inward. Cynicism replaces engagement. People stop arguing with policy and start enduring it. Not because they agree, but because there's no obvious lever to pull. This is usually the moment legitimacy doesn't collapse. It thins. AI didn't enter government as authority. It entered as assistance, decision support, forecasting, risk assessment, resource optimization. At first, nothing felt political. A model helps prioritize cases, a system predicts demand, an algorithm flags anomalies. Each tool promises the same things: efficiency, consistency, fewer errors. No one voted for these outcomes. They emerged because automated systems optimize policy faster than human deliberation can keep up. And in isolation, each promise feels reasonable. Internal evaluations across large public systems already show the same pattern. Once automated tools outperform human throughput, workflows reorganize around them, not because they are flawless, but because everything else becomes too slow. This is usually where dependency begins, not because humans stop deciding, but because they start deciding after the system has already shaped the options, after priorities are ranked, after thresholds are set, after timelines are defined. Human judgment doesn't disappear, it moves downstream, and once decisions happen downstream, the shape of policy has already been determined upstream. You feel this the first time a decision affects your life and no one can explain who actually made it. This is how policy slips into procedure, not through intent, but through momentum. Once that momentum builds, stopping it feels unnatural. Manual alternatives start to look outdated, slower, less reliable. The system becomes the reference point, not because it was chosen, but because everything else now feels like a downgrade. This is usually when assistance quietly becomes dependency. Here's the turning point most people miss. Once optimization defines what is efficient, debate starts to look wasteful. Once risk models define what is safe, discretion starts to look dangerous. Once automated systems define what is normal, questioning starts to look irresponsible. This is usually when policy stops feeling like policy. No law changes, no announcement is made. Still, outcomes stabilize. Eligibility rules harden. Enforcement patterns repeat. Exceptions quietly disappear. Internal audits repeatedly show that once automated coordination systems are embedded, reversing them becomes politically riskier than tolerating their flaws. Not because they are trusted, but because stopping them creates visible disruption. This is the quiet replacement. Politics doesn't vanish. It loses leverage. Decisions still happen. But the range of acceptable decisions narrows. Policy no longer asks, "What should we do?" It asks, "What will the system tolerate?" And tolerance becomes the new boundary of politics. Decisions aren't rejected, they're pre-filtered. Possibilities don't fail in debate, they never surface. This feels like sensible adaptation, until you realize the adaptation removes the ability to disagree. What remains looks neutral, technical, inevitable. This is how power stops arguing and starts assuming. And because no one officially decided this, no one feels responsible for defending it, governance continues without deliberation. Power still exists in this world. Budgets pass, agencies operate, leaders speak. From the outside, authority appears intact. Still, there's a difference between having power and being able to exercise it independently. Modern governments no longer govern through people and paperwork alone. They govern through systems that coordinate reality faster than humans ever could. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. I didn't realize how much authority depended on what could still be questioned, until so many decisions became just how the system works. This is the quiet danger, not tyranny, not takeover, normalization. Normalization is the most durable form of control. Once people depend on a system, questioning it feels destabilizing. Not dangerous in theory, dangerous in practice. And when disruption feels riskier than submission, power no longer needs enforcement. It maintains itself. A world where governance continues, but consent fades. Not because it was revoked, but because it was never asked for. When systems become essential, removing them stops being a political option. Turning them off means delays, failures, public anger. So leaders hesitate. They commission reviews instead of overrides. They draft frameworks instead of pulling plugs. And while that happens, the system keeps running. Over time, that running becomes its own justification. If outcomes arrive on time, few people ask how they were decided. If services remain functional, legitimacy feels abstract. You see it when officials say, "We can't change that. The system requires it," even when no law demands it. This is how governance survives without consent. By performing stability well enough that questioning it feels like a risk rather than a responsibility. The system doesn't need trust, it only needs continuity. The real question isn't whether AI governs. It's whether anyone remembers when policy stopped being something humans openly chose. If this shifted how you think about where policy really comes from, tap like. It helps surface conversations that usually stay buried beneath technical language. Subscribe to become part of the Unlocked, where we explore how power, infrastructure, and intelligence quietly reshape the world around us. And if someone you know still believes governance only changes through votes and laws, share this with them. Authority doesn't need to be announced to take hold. Because the future isn't coming, it's already here.